You have one unheard message.
Hi, I was calling Current, the influencer marketing platform, but I think I just got redirected to a bunch of people listening to a podcast. Well, anyways, I was calling Current because I was told they could help get my brand set up on TikTok Shop and even build out an affiliate program of content creators promoting my brand. And even have those content creators go on live streams and promote my product there. Wow, I could really use Current. I also heard that the brands they work with are making millions in sales. I guess I'll just go to their website at current.tech.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit a million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
No music, no intro. Another episode of hashtag Saints Twitter podcast. We got our man back on, Gregg Rosenthal from NFL Network. We were gonna have a around the hashtag Saints Twitter podcast with Patrick coming on, but he had other responsibilities, so he had to bow out. But
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was gonna be a full house. There is the whole Black Lives Matter thing, so we wanted to put as much pressure on you as possible.
I mean, what pressure would I feel? That would have been it would have been delightful. Though I would have felt bad getting Claybon on two different podcasts. Not that this is mine in 2 days. Poor guy's working full time and has a 3-week-old kid. So come on, be careful with what you're asking for.
Oh, for sure. That's why when he bowed out, it wasn't an issue or anything. First of all, just checking in with you, Greg. Like how everything is going with you. Everything going with you with all this pandemic stuff still going.
It's all right. It's different. I'm not like everyone else. Although you went to Texas, unfortunately, you had to go. But I'm not leaving LA. I'm here. I'm with my kids. And it's like, at least work-wise, it's like, man, training. It just seems like suddenly is close. This whole off season is like, well, we'll see what it's like when we get there. And it's like, now it's like, okay, we're 5 weeks away. We're almost there.
Man.
And it's not looking great.
It isn't. And that's a question I wanted to start with is I'm still flummoxed that an NFL season is actually going to happen. I haven't been in touch with football for obvious reasons, the last couple of weeks. But like something I read in Texas is like the Clemson football team, like 23 of their players tested positive for coronavirus. And I'm just thinking, how is it possible that any sport really is going to happen and take place? It's still baffling to me.
Yeah, we'll wait and see. I mean, I got my doubts. I'm following this like crazy. I'm not like a news guy. I have been at different points in my life, like very into politics, other points in my life, not at all. But I am that person this year, between the coronavirus and then the protests and everything. I mean, that's all I do is read all this stuff. But so when it comes to like the teams practice, like this is happening in colleges all over the place, like Kansas State, LSU, the Bucks had a couple people, and I keep coming back. Now it's like I don't want to keep repeating myself, but it's like, what do we know? We don't know anything. My big thing is like if the country doesn't have it under control, then football's not going to have it under control. Right. It's just part of the country. I don't think they're going to come up with some magic solution that makes it safe unless cases are down all over the country, and they're not. They're going up.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, when the NFL is just so large and powerful, we just kind of figure they're going to figure this out. They're going to have some kind of protocol in place, and everything's just going to be, everything's going to be fine. But just the reality of the virus, how it works, I just don't see it, man. I see games happening. Every single person I've talked to, kind of within the league or around the league, there will be football, but I'm like almost 100% sure there won't be fans there, and I don't know how long the season will be because we don't know what's going to come up during the season. When a quarterback gets coronavirus.
Right.
It's like what? How is this going to work? You know what I'm saying?
There's a million different repercussions that you could come up with that no one has even thought about. And the NBA is going to get into it a little bit. Their situation is different, but they're going to be a little ahead of the NFL and baseball too. But not really, because training camps basically opening when their games are opening. And like, it's not just like the players getting it. It's just, I don't even know, man. It's like, okay, the people you're talking to can be confident. What do they know? They don't know anything.
Right.
It's like this. There was this column, and I like my old boss, Mike Florio at PFT, but he wrote this column like a month into it that's like, games will be played and fans will be in the crowd. And I'm thinking, you don't know anything right now. And I think all that we found out the last few months is, we know even less now. I mean, there's so many different questions about like, even if you have the antibodies, are you okay? And until people change their attitudes, like if you want to help football, be safe. Like Tom Brady's not, like, we heard the Bucks are still practicing, even though a couple Bucks got coronavirus and they're supposed the NFLPA is telling them not to practice. They're still out there doing it by themselves anyway. So it's like the players aren't really listening.
I hate to say it, but I feel like that's a reflection. So kind of talking about the virus just in terms of geographical, I'm out here in California, LA, whatever, just like you are. And it's a very different, you go to a store, most places you go to, people are wearing masks, what have you. As I made my road trip to Texas, the further I went east, like Arizona and Texas especially, you would have thought that nothing was going on in the world. Like everything was completely fine. Grocery stores, Target, people not wearing masks, people not really taking precautions, maybe some slight social distancing. And I was like, is this the wild, wild west? Like, this is precisely why this is not being controlled. And I think that just shows like the mindset of just, I won't say arrogance, but just nonchalantness when it comes to everything.
Right. Well, I heard, someone who covers it speak to it well, which is like all the places that had it in a bad way then started taking it serious. And they're all in great shape right now. The Northeast, most of the Northwest, even New Orleans. Like Louisiana is a great example of it. New Orleans is in good shape right now, but the rest of Louisiana is starting to have problems because it's like New Orleans got scared straight. And like that's what's happening in the whole country. Texas, especially right now, seems like a big problem. And now their governor's finally saying like stay home, and it's late for that. And it's not the first. The thing that scares me too is the second wave. Like this is still the first wave going, but Fauci and the people that know think that the winter, when the flu season comes, is going to be worse.
I keep saying that. Everybody like, man, this second wave is something. Like, this ain't the second wave. You're still in the first wave, man. Like, come on.
No, like Europe is they're now going to, if they have anything pop up, it's going to be their second wave because they got it under control. But the U.S. has 20% of the cases in the world. We have 4% of the population. Like, we're in worse shape than anywhere.
I feel like we're still in the first half.
It's depressing.
It's super. Yeah, maybe we should actually talk about football things.
I do feel like I owe you, not to cut you off, though. I had to get back on the Saints Twitter podcast quick. First of all, because you guys are showing me up, having way better guests every week, way better conversations. Ballsy, Claybon. I mean, you got some Cosell. You had some classic episodes. And then two, I kind of owed you because Adam told me, it's like, oh no, it's okay, man. You can smoke. Don't worry. I was like, I don't know. Before we did the pod last time, it's like I was just rambling fool.
Greg was lit.
No, I wasn't
No,
lit, but I was, it was not professional.
that was my favorite, one of my favorite episodes, man, because you was just like chilling, you was just like chilling, one of the boys, you know. That was
Um,
my love it.
so you did this series, or I know you're working on quarterbacks right now, but you did this series a while back in terms of going through like NFL depth charts, and I thought like maybe something was happening at the network where you like felt like your job was in danger, because I was like, my man's bringing the heat. Like, what is going on? We just taking a step back when you did that piece, because I don't want to make this all about the Saints. What is something that kind of just jumped out to you in general when kind of all three teams? Because first, I obviously I know a lot of your work, and that for sure has been some of the best work I've seen you do.
Well, let's start with the Saints. Why not? Or that division. I mean, yeah, I do the projected starters. That's what you're talking about every year.
Right.
And
Love it.
yeah, Ryan's a big fan. See, Ryan knew it. I did it every year. Adam's just like, oh, he's working extra hard this year, so I know you really haven't been on it. But that's one of my favorite things I do all year, because it's kind of like the minute you can turn the page. Once the draft is done, you can turn the page from one season to the next. You can look at the rosters, and most of them are 95% done. And to me, it's great prep to go through, put together what the starting lineups are going to be. And you start getting a feel of like what positions are good, like what teams are a little better than you thought. And, I came away thinking just like the Saints, to start with them, was the best roster in the league. I mean, that's not a huge hot take, but just their backups are better than a lot of people's starters at like a decent amount of positions. Like their O-line, to me, I think Warford was cut in the middle of me doing this, but either way, their O-line is either the best or one of the two or three best. You have Drew, Kamara, and Thomas, and enough good guys behind them. You have Payton, and then you have the secondary, which I like a lot. And you guys know I believe in Marcus Davenport. So it's just like it's hard to find a weakness. You look at most teams, and you can find a couple pretty decent weaknesses, and it's hard to find one on paper for the Saints.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been one of the off-season things. Everyone saying, "Hey, Saints have a pretty good roster. It's deep and it's great." And I'm like, thanks. Of all years, they have like a super deep roster. It's going to be this year.
Right.
But but I like, I mean, I try to be as unbiased and objective when looking at our roster. And obviously, you could poke holes. You could say, okay, linebackers. There's some questions there with injuries or injury concern. Or the defensive line, Sheldon Rankins coming off an injury. Marcus Davenport coming off an injury. But overall, when you look at it, it's like, they could absorb a couple injuries and they won't be knocked down a lot of pegs. But I really enjoyed your roster projections because, me following the Saints, I follow the Saints and a lot of NFC teams. AFC is kind of hard because we just don't see them much on TV. So I love your articles because I could get a good picture of what's going on in the entire NFL, because you dive into not just, I mean, with the starters, but kind of the names that you really don't hear about on the NFL Network all the time, or ESPN or whatever. So I find it really valuable. I don't play fantasy football much, but not just for fantasy, but just to know, okay, what are these teams going to look like, when we face them this year, going into the schedule.
Right. And like, even it just is good, like reminder sometimes, like doing the Texans, for instance, like everyone's all worried about, not that their receiver group is like that under the radar, but everyone's all worried, okay, they're going to be terrible without DeAndre Hopkins. And then, you do this and you remember, it's like they got Cooks, Fuller, Cobb, and Stills. Like they might struggle this year for whatever reason, but to me, it's not going to be about their receivers. That's a good group. Like they'll have an injury or two there, and maybe they're not the best group in the world. So it's just like, it's a good reminder. It's like, okay, you can lose DeAndre Hopkins, but that's that's not their problem. Their problem might be, defense,
Defense.
secondary,
Yeah.
offensive line. Like they could have a lot of problems, but to me, like that's not their problem. And then there's certain teams that you end up liking a little more after doing this. Like the Colts, to me, they put their team together the right way. They, if Rivers can play, they look good on paper. The Raiders, I think, look pretty good on paper, but on paper only matters so much. Like I remember doing this. It's like I think I said the Falcons had the best roster in the league 3 years ago, and the Eagles, had the best one or two, and what they, they didn't really do. What they do with it?
It's the NFL,
He just
man.
got injured.
So now you're working on quarterbacks, going through quarterbacks. Are you ranking them? Like, what is your process of going through the quarterbacks right now?
I'm trying to do something new, just looking at a bunch of the young quarterbacks. I'm not even sure how I'm going to do it exactly, but like Darnold, Locke, Baker, Kyler, basically the first and second year guys, but not like Lamar. It's like Lamar won an MVP. I don't,
Yeah,
I wrote
we're good.
I don't need to. Yeah, I wrote about him last year. So, and the third, the second and third year guys. I mean, Locke has been my kind of biggest takeaway so far. That he was a little better than I've been kind of down on him because I saw a certain selection of his games, but after watching him close, I'm a little more excited about Drew Lock than I was.
Yeah. I watched a little of him before I did this End Zone podcast last week. I watched very little of Drew Lock coming out and last year, so I was just like, let me just go in fresh-eyed and see. But when I was looking, I was like, okay, okay, I mean, I can't say much because it was a small sample size, but I don't know would you put him above Daniel Jones or about even? I kind of have him even.
I want to watch Jones, and I watched them all during the year, like on Game Pass and stuff on the condensed, and I try to go watch every game, and I do but it's a little different than in the off season, like watching every play a couple of times, watching the coach's film, and writing notes and just watching him. So my instinct would be I'd have him ahead of Jones because Locke made his teammates better. He got better each week, and he had a ton of pressure. PFF has a stat of like the sacks you take, divided by the amount of pressures you got.
Yeah.
He was the best in the league at avoiding sacks. He avoided so many negative plays.
I mean,
and he made plays too, but he avoided negative plays when his line was terrible, whereas they couldn't do anything with Joe Flacco.
Yeah, in terms of like when you have Garrett Bowles as I watch Broncos games and he is really bad. But I would say, it is what it is. But I would say that in terms of success, I would say I've been very critical of John Elway in the past, but they've put a lot around Drew Lock, besides maybe O-line, to be successful, getting Jerry Jeudy, Noah Fant, who had a terrible start to a terrible rookie season, then just ballooned at the end of his rookie season. Melvin Gordon, like that offense has a lot of potential, and Cortland Sutton's an absolute stud. So it's not going to be for lack of weapons that's around.
And Lindsey's good, and Fant's good. I mean, that's the thing. Once Locke was in there, Fant was better.
Yeah.
Yep.
He even made Deshaun Hamilton, who didn't do anything, make some plays at the end of the year. Like he made his players better, and it really struck me watching him and Darnold back to back, because you think Darnold would be able to create more because he's so athletic. He is athletic, and can make a couple throws each game that just knock you out. And he's the type of quarterback I've been wrong about over and over again, like Cutler and Henne and these guys who just make like 3 throws a game that you're just like, damn, like only 6 guys in the league can make that throw. But he doesn't create that well on his own. Whereas Locke made a lot of plays, I thought, like on his own and on the move, and Darnold didn't.
So are you kind of down on Sam Darnold because he was a guy? Yeah, he was a guy I believed in. Coming out of USC, even while he was at USC, I'm not a big college football guy, but like there are certain players that will make me watch college football, and he was one of them. Like if I saw a USC game, I'm like, okay, let me see what Sam Darnold doing. But it's kind of hard for me to differentiate what's the Jets and what's Sam Darnold. So Are you thinking like Sam Darnold is kind of a problem, or is it just the jet structure and all the stuff that comes with him?
Well, it's hard to separate it. That's trying to watch football.
Yeah.
But I think some of it's on him. And you're not going to be able to separate it, by the way, anyways. They still
Right.
look terrible. Still have Adam Gase. But even when he's clean, like he misses a decent amount of throws.
Mm-hmm.
And his decision making isn't that great. Like that's the thing. Like Locke, like not to keep comparing those two, but like Locke made good decisions for the most part. And that's the different. Like the times you keep Darnold clean, like he'll mostly light you up, which means okay, you're an NFL quarterback. That's sort of like the baseline. There's like
Right.
20, 22 guys at all times. Like if you protect them, they'll light you up. But that was pretty much true of that's true of Andy Dalton. That's almost true of like Blake Bortles, like that, you're going to do that. But he's not like super accurate and he's not like super good at making decisions. Like that's like the two things, when you look at the little Belichick list of what he wants from a quarterback, those are his top two things. And I don't know, he hasn't been too good at that. He is young though. I mean, he's like younger than Locke. He's younger than Burrow. So that, that you got to keep that in mind.
What is kind of going away from the quarterbacks, getting back to your roster reset or your projected starter series? What's something when you did the series this year that kind of surprised you, maybe from a team that maybe surprised you for good or for worse?
The Raiders, I like a little better. They're kind of like the Saints too. Like, well, no, not that's a little too nice, but like, I like their line. I used to dog on Tom Cable. I mean, there's a lot to dog on Tom Cable about. Offensive line coach, by all accounts, not a superhuman, who was like making a lot of money with offensive lines that struggled. But I don't know. He did a pretty good job. Like their O-line played really well last year, and on paper, it looks really good. And kind of like Denver, they added a ton of weapons around Carr, and the defense makes sense to me. Like they got the two linebackers, Littleton and Kwiatkowski. They tried to add some people in the secondary. It's just like their defense was so bad last year.
Yeah.
And if they can just it's kind of like the Saints, back in the day. Like if they can just get their
average,
if they can just be average, that's going to be such a big improvement. I think their offense actually could be pretty good.
I still does Derek Carr, for the lack of a better word, concern you though in terms of holding that team back?
Yeah. I've never been too in on Carr. He seems kind of like that Dalton line of like he's just kind of like he's gonna go with what's he's not gonna lift the guys around him. He's just gonna be a product of his team. So that worries me. And their schedule's not easy either. Early, it does make you think that you might see Mariota at some point.
Yeah, and plus just speaking to that defense, like that is not a division to be bad in defense.
That's
like
true.
It just isn't. So
no, but they got like if you look at their safeties, Demarius Randall, and Jonathan Abram, who was playing well last year.
Right.
Pointer's kind of like their slot corner. Trayvon Mullen actually played really well and was like kind of impressed me as a rookie. He was like playing through like a separated shoulder at the end of the year when he didn't need to and was competing. And did they sign Eli Apple in the end? No, the Panthers did in the end. But
right. They signed him and then they reneged or what have you.
I've heard from some good sources that it was like, I don't know what happened, but they pretty much used any excuse to fail his physical.
What do you mean? Because it's like a bad meeting or something?
I don't know. I really want to know what exactly happened. Like, did they like dig deeper into the film or something? Like maybe they watched like two tapes. They watched them against like, I don't know, Chicago last year. Like, oh yeah, let's sign this guy. Then they watched him against like the Falcons or something. It's like, oh no, never mind.
Well, something's up. You guys are Saints fans. You hear all the, whispers, and you watch the games. They didn't seem too interested in keeping Eli Apple, which I was.
All I know is like you could watch about 5 games, especially like when Drew Brees was out, and think, wow, this is a good starting cornerback. Like if you watched them just in those games, you'd be like, this is a good quality starting cornerback. And then you could watch like 4 other games and be like, I don't want this guy starting on my team. And I know he was injured at some point. I don't know what
Right.
affected that or whatever, but it's just one of those things.
Yeah, maybe he's better as a depth guy. You're just reminding me though of like, I know we finished talking about Locke, but the one thing I'm concerned about more of the Broncos, because I talked to someone about how I was kind of excited about Locke. Hey, what do you think? I've been asking people what they think about Locke, and people love him, but almost everyone, a couple people inside the league, their first response was like, yeah, but look at his coordinator now. When's the last time you saw Pat Shermer coordinate anything? Have a good offense. And it's true. I've sort of slept on that they fired the guy who is there now, and Pat Shermer is their coordinator, who's really one decent season in the last like 10 years of teams he's been running. Was Case Keenum just kind of running around like with like a chicken with his head cut off and throwing it up in the air, and it somehow working out for the Vikings back in like 2017. And that's about it for Pat Shermer. That's his best offense. Was
But
Keenum just running around?
he seems to always roll that into a head coaching gig. Like,
Right, he gets head
you
coaching,
got Sam
get
Bradford.
coordinator. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's like weird. Back to quarterbacks. I was when I told you I was doing that End Zone podcast.
Yeah, what's up with that? So what? Now you're doing other pods? I mean,
Look at this guy.
look at you.
My guy Eric, he's a huge fan of you guys at ATN, and he just kind of brought me on and just come on every now and then. But we were doing this kind of roundtable discussion on quarterbacks rankings, and I was doing my rankings. And look, I'm an Aaron Rodgers fan. I love watching him ball. But I was ranking, and I got like to like a section, and I had Aaron Rodgers and Dak still out there. And I just started wondering, like, if you look at like just the last 3 or 4 years of Aaron Rodgers, how big is the gap between Aaron Rodgers and Dak Prescott? And I'm like, I had to separate like my Cowboys hate, and just kind of look at Dak Prescott as what he's done, how consistent he's been the last couple of years. Like, I still put Aaron Rodgers above Dak Prescott. Like, I just can't do it. But is the gap that huge?
No, I think I'd put Dak ahead of him.
Wow.
At this point.
Wow.
I know it feels crazy, but I guess
feels crazy.
Last year was the year for me. For both guys. I actually feel less sure about Dak in some ways than what I'm talking about with Rodgers, which is that he hasn't been the same level for like 5 years, and again, he's a guy who's going to make a couple unbelievable throws, and he's still like a really good starter, but he's got this weird combination of like he doesn't like taking chances, and that's good. It's a little like Brady late in his career. It's like he just, no matter what he does, he's just going to try to avoid a turnover and avoid an interception, but he hasn't been a top 5 quarterback for years. There's no way he was last year, and Dak was so good last year. Dak's been a little up and down too. I actually think he played great as a rookie, and last year, his third year was not good, and so he's been a little up and down. But I mean, he was great last year, and I think you got to take him.
It's funny. I think the most eye-opening game for me watching Rodgers last year was that second Lions game. Of course, the Lions blew. And in that first half, like, he was just missing easy just throws for almost like 3 quarters. And then whatever, like the Packers win the game. But it was like stark of how much he was missing these passes, and they weren't even close. I don't know if you remember that game, but I remember it pretty vividly because the Saints and playoff seeding had such a huge implication. And
that game changed the whole thing.
Did.
I mean, that game and the 49ers game, but yeah.
That game, the 49ers game, the Seahawks game, the goal line, whatever. This is revisionist history. But I think the Lions were starting like their third straight. I can't even remember. It was just.
He could get there. Like Rodgers, he'll have like 5 games stretches where he's there, but I don't think he's really been there consistently for the last 3 years, where like the top guys put together like an entire. That's how I judge quarterbacks the best, is like a 16-game schedule. Like, that's the best way to judge them, or 18, with the playoffs. And he hasn't put together like a complete season like the top guys in a minute.
That's strange, man. Like, that's just weird. The way he was, like, he was God with a football. Like, it was like I was watching his highlights from like 2000 and I don't know, 12 or 13 or something like that. And it was just like, man, the throws he would make, and he still makes those throws. But only reason I put him above Dak was because like he's still a guy with like 1 minute left in the game for a quarter.
Yeah.
I trust him over Dak like every day of the week because I just trust him to make whatever throws that would need to be made. Where Dak, I've seen Dak just kind of struggle with pressure late in games and kind of get caught and kind of run into pressure like he does at times.
Right, and he didn't look as good the last few, right down the stretch at the end of last year. But the difference with Rodgers now is like, man, his bad weeks are bad. I mean, he was not competitive in those games against the 49ers. The first one it was a little harsh. The whole team was bad, but like, if you're that level of quarterback, you can't have 4 or 5 games like that a year where you're just kind of like a total non-factor.
What teams, like you said, the Broncos, the Raiders, kind of surprise you? What about teams that you, like, in theory, you would feel that would be better, but you kind of left taking like I'm not too sure about them, like, at their starters?
Like, I always want to like the Falcons, which, that's why I'm not really I'm obviously a fake Saints fan. If I always I've rooted for this Falcons team through this little run here, especially after they blew the Super Bowl. I just felt like they
blew the Super Bowl against your Patriots, by the way.
I was thinking like they'd be a logical team to sort of bounce back, but I'm frozen. Shoot.
No, you're good. I mean, I can hear you.
No, you were frozen. You could hear me the whole time?
Yeah, the whole time.
Just keep talking.
Why? Because you guys can't edit or what?
Ryan doesn't edit. What are you talking about?
You edit that at all? I know. I didn't. Should I go connect it? I could hardwire it.
You're fine. This is a mom and pop operation.
You guys are frozen.
We don't have Erica producing our pod.
Can't call it
I could plug it in. You guys just go on like a long rant, and I'll go plug it in. No, but I was talking like I want to like this Falcons team more than I did after looking at it though, because like Jones, Ridley, I kind of like Hayden Hurst, like, and the O line maybe could be better. I like Matt Ryan. Like, I feel like they could be good on offense, but then I look and I'm just not convinced at all about the defense, and I'm not convinced at all about Dirk Cutter. So I don't think y'all have much to worry about.
No, I'm willing to always look at, especially the people that, like, teams that are obviously, the rival. I try to look at them unbiased, and like I kind of want to not believe in the Falcons, but just kind of think they're more than they are because, I mean, Matt Ryan. I mean, say what you want about him, he was an MVP, and he's a quality quarterback. Julio Jones. We can argue about if he's 1, 2, or 3, or 4, but obviously, any team game planning against him, he's going to be the number one, opponent they're trying to figure out. So I look at them like they should be a challenge, and they're always a challenge against the Saints. But just overall, with their record, they should be a 10-plus win team. Just when you look at the roster, I'm like, it's not great, but it should be good enough to win 10 games. And I think they might hit that, but we'll see. With Todd Gurley, I think the running game is very important to Matt Ryan. I've always thought that with him throughout his entire – I mean, it's not about, do they have to be like a top 5 rushing offense? No, they don't have to be that. But, I think it really helps him to play action, and I think it helps his vision and seeing the field. It helps everything. And I've always felt that even when it was with like Mike Smith or whatever. And I think that's going to be key, especially with the offense, the offensive line. That's the number one key. I mean, if they've been trying to figure out the offensive line for so long, they've drafted, they've tried everything.
I don't know how Thomas Dimitroff still has a job. Like,
This is the year. I don't think they will. I think they partly kept Quinn because I think they wanted to they clean him out at the same time, and so I think they're going to let these two first round offensive linemen. I mean, the right side of their offensive line were both first round picks last year, or their center and their right tackle, or no, their guard.
No, their guard. Yeah,
right tackle. It's like those guys have to play better. In theory, they could be. They could be a fun offense to watch, but that's another team where you talk to some people in the league, and I think there's a thought of like, is Dirk really up for it? I think there's a thought like, hey, there's a lot of young, smart, innovative offensive coaches. And they're not all young. Some of them are old, like Sean Payton. They're been around for forever, like Josh McDaniels. But if you don't have one of those guys, you better have unbelievable talent. And Dirk Cutter is not one of those guys. I think,
and this is coming from like the biggest Todd Gurley friend coming out of Georgia. I've always been a huge fan of his. I just don't know if he has anything left to give. Like, just is like, I saw him a couple of games last season, and like it was just not the same guy. Like, I got sad as a Todd Gurley fan just seeing him kind of struggle. So them relying on him, and he may not be the same person, could be a recipe for disaster as well.
Yeah, I mean, he was running hard for a while last year, but he wasn't making anybody miss, and so then you're just another guy. I mean, to me, him being just another guy is, I almost would take that if I'm the Falcons. I'm worried he'll be worse than that, that he'll get hurt or that he'll be like a bad starter.
Yeah. When you look at it, when you try to just say, okay, will he be just a quality starting running back? I think he could be that. I think it. But, I mean, to expect what he was when he was coming out of Georgia, I think that's just going, which is sad, but,
I'd be surprised if he was a quality starter. I mean, the Rams basically had to pay to give him away. This is a guy that they got egg on their face because of it. Yeah. He had more billboards around LA than Goff and Donald. He was the face of the team.
He was. Really was. I mean, yeah, for sure.
I mean, if anyone was, he was the face of the team. And I know people, that work for that team, and all they spent 2 years defending that contract, and then they bounced them the second they could, even though they're eating money just to do it. They couldn't wait to get rid of him.
Damn.
I mean, right? That says it all. That they had to pay to get rid of him. I don't know.
So getting to your quarterbacks, is Jared Goff someone that you're watching or you've watched in your? But I don't know if he fits the criteria of what you're looking for young quarterbacks.
I mean, I feel like I've watched them all, but Goff especially, I've always been sort of fascinated by trying to figure out who he is.
Right?
He's still young, man. I think he's a guy who gets affected by pressure more than most, and they had, PFF had him as like the 31st pass blocking team in the league. So they're all about timing and play action. Obviously, they play action more than any team in the league, and everything's timing, repeating the same plays over and over. And when you have a bad O-line, that just ruins it. I think if you've got an even halfway decent offensive line, I think he's an asset. I think he's like a top 10 to 12 quarterback, whose highs are really good. I mean, he's had some games that are pretty impressive. I think he's a solid starter, but he's not going to be that like top 5 guy ever.
Yeah. I think PFF had a stat where, I don't know. I mean, we could argue about PFF and how they come up with their numbers, but it was something like after Jared Goff's first read, he was like 32nd in the league in quarterback ranking. However they came up with that, I was like, okay,
how do you calculate that?
Yeah, but even I guess you could relate that to offensive line play. If you're standing in the pocket for past 2.5 seconds, you go into your second and third read, and if he had a bad offensive line, obviously that affects his throws. Obviously, I think it's more than that, but it is interesting, his system that he has set up around him, with McVay, in his ear and stuff like that. I always wanted to know, like, how much is to that, or is that kind of like Twitter trope, that McVay is just telling them what to do every snap or whatever.
I mean, I can. So Greg and I were both at the Saints game in LA 2 years ago at the Coliseum. You're at that game too, right, Greg? Yeah, you were there. And it is very noticeable when Goff is on offense that McVay, for sure, at least up to that point, was taking up to the 15 seconds and telling him like what, like,
yeah.
Like that's not a trope. Like it's no, like it is, like you can watch it and see it. Like that is not something that's made up.
That was the game where it was like, I swear the late afternoon, people sleep on the late afternoon sort of mist and the dew. People start slipping on that field, and then guys with arms like Breeze, it starts showing up, like that air starts getting a little too thick for Drew Brees.
Yep.
It's a tough place to throw in the late afternoon. Whereas Goff, people love Goff. People like McVay love Goff because, look, McVay's dad came up with, running the 49ers. When Goff like hits his foot and hits you on time, like you said, 2.5 seconds, it looks more like Joe Montana, but with a little bigger arm now because, it's 30 years later than anyone else. Like he does hit dudes in strides and he makes some tough passes. That's why I think people were a little wrong about last year about how bad he was. I think he was just, average or a little below average, which is not what you want out of a number 1 overall pick. So that's a big disappointment. But you could tell people weren't watching the games because there was like 4 or 5 games where, man, he made he made as many crazy good throws last year as he did in any of the other years. But it was just like the offense was a mess and they couldn't keep it going. He can still make some pretty great throws.
Speaking with that same draft class, Ryan and I have this conversation all the time, like this just fascination about Carson Wentz. Like that same question of who is Carson Wentz. Obviously, he's been more effective with injuries than Goff has been, but I think it's an interesting conversation to bring up of like who he is as a quarterback.
Yeah. He's been tough because he doesn't get to have he hasn't been in a great rhythm where he's played a bunch of games in a row healthy with the same players. Either he gets hurt or the players around him are getting hurt. So I think that's part of it. I think he's shown you enough where he's like resourceful that you can ride with him,
Yeah, I came away. I was questioning him up until last year, and even though last year wasn't his greatest year, I kind of felt better about him after last year. Like just with with all the injuries they had and
throwing a side.
Yeah, and he was making it work, man. Like when I watched him again, I was like, he gonna be all right. Before that, like before last year, I remember when the Saints played them in 2018, and they beat the Eagles pretty bad during the regular season. And I just remember looking at his eyes, and he just looked kind of, I don't know. It was too much for him. I was like, I don't know.
If Claiborne was on this, he'd be like, what did you see in his eyes?
Yeah, what exactly did you see?
I think it's a fair question. I don't know if I'm buying this eyes treatment.
Yeah, and it's fair. It really is fair. That's just me.
Ryan's point, when Peter King did like his Monday morning quarterback, whatever column, where he was embedded with the Saints before they played the Eagles, Sean Payton's game plan defensively was to put it on Carson Wentz, which it's not something you hear a lot, from an opposing coach that I'm going to dare the other starting quarterback to beat.
Now, what year was this?
This was
2018.
18.
Yeah, so hopefully he's developed mentally. That's the thing is quarterbacks. They're all developing mentally at some at faster paces than others. Some come in faster, but man, that's the hugest thing there is. Even Mahomes was talking about it, who's the greatest quarterback I've ever seen, saying, man, I couldn't really
read a defense.
He's exaggerating. Of course he could read like defenses in a way that we couldn't, but he's feeling like, okay, now I'm starting to unlock like the next level of like, if they're doing this, I can do this and this, and like really understanding what they're doing,
which is absolutely insane.
Right. And that's Mahomes. So here's what Wentz, you guys got me thinking kind of like, he is a tough one because I love guys who are accurate and he's not super accurate. Like, and so that always feels like you're going to have to overcome a few things, but he does seem like a guy you can ride with in the way that like McNair was and McNabb maybe.
I think
Guys that are physical, you know, and kind of they can figure it out and find a way. And those guys also, like, they get, as they've been in the league longer, they'll figure out some more things to, you know, and I think he'll be like that.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And it's oh man, quarterbacks is just so weird because I mean, look at Tannehill. I mean, it's like you don't even have him figured out after like 6 years. You don't really know, you know. It's like you really don't know what you have. I always wonder, like, what would RG3 be like if he just stayed healthy?
Oh my God,
if he just stayed healthy, you know, what would he be? I mean, would he be out the league? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know.
The fact that the Shanahans didn't, although I guess he wasn't healthy, but
I mean, that was partly
I don't know.
because,
Them being down on him made me down on him. If they were kind of selling that he was going to last for long, then I guess I'm buying what they're saying.
I mean, I'm just going to preface it by saying, like, they made him play a playoff game with, like, a torn ligament in his knee. So
on a stanky leg. He was doing a stanky leg in a playoff game.
Let's not absolve the Shanahan's completely here.
No, that was messed up. That was a bad game.
But he's in the league now, you know, and obviously he hadn't done enough in his backup role to just kind of open eyes. I mean, look at Teddy. You know, Teddy, say what you want about him, but he's done enough to, you know, get a little starting gig, you know, at least temporarily.
Well,
you know, and so
he's someone. I mean, I love Teddy, so I'm biased. I've always been rooting for him, and I've always thought he could be a good player, and I still do. And even if he wasn't that impressive with the Saints last year, he was kind of doing what was being called for on some level, and what's going to be called for in Carolina is going to be throwing it 45 times a game with a lot of people to throw to. I mean, they've got a lot of people to throw to. They got McCaffrey. I like DJ Moore. They got Curtis Samuel. My biggest takeaway watching Darnold was, man, Robbie Anderson, that was a hell of a contract push. He still didn't get a huge contract, but
no, he didn't.
He was awesome at the end of last year.
He was
catching a bunch of bad Darnold passes. And their line isn't bad either. But they got Okung, they got Taylor and hopefully Matt Rule is kind of a fun, hopefully for me, a fun offensive coach. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if like Teddy is a top 10, fantasy type quarterback, just like putting up some stats.
Yeah, I mean they're going to have to, just in terms of that offense, because that defense.
And people say he can't throw deep. It's like I don't know. Maybe he doesn't try to, but he could throw deep at Louisville. He has thrown deep. He could throw deep when he was with Minnesota. It's like he should be able to.
He has a nice arm. He had one of the best throws in the Saints offense, like this last season. Like I think it was against Tampa or Chicago, one of them. This is one of the best throws by any quarterback, quarterbacking for the Saints. So I mean, it's just I screamed it 20 times in my living room. Pull the trigger,
right. It wasn't great though. Yeah, I can't lie, it wasn't great. But I'm hoping he's a little bit like Alex Smith, who he has been compared to, where if he finds the right place, kind of mid-career, he could do some things. And then after Alex Smith was with some good coaches, people were like, all right, Alex Smith.
Yeah. I mean, he was a starting quarterback, and he was doing pretty good with the Redskins.
Ripped your heart out at him in person.
Shut up.
Really, Greg? This is someone that I've broken bread with?
I mean, get over it. It's been like a decade.
No.
It really doesn't bother me anymore. I think what bothers me is thinking like I paid nearly $200 to like feel that pain.
Yeah.
And I think about now, like when they're not going to be doing it now, but people who spend insane amount of money to see their favorite team play, regardless of what sport, and they lose in heartbreaking fashion.
Right. I mean, you've had so many other heartbreaking playoff losses since then. You would think you would forget all about that one.
Anyone who's listening to this podcast who's a Saints fan is just going to block Greg immediately.
What's this guy?
We got to get the unfollowed from Ryan.
Yeah. Never.
I mean, we could talk about football forever. When going through like the rosters, did the Ravens the Chiefs and the Ravens, being the jewel of the AFC, any surprises? Just because we don't really talk about the AFC very much. that stood out to you?
About those two teams?
Or no, just about the AFC in general.
I like man, the AFC North is tough. I like Cincinnati's weapons. They should be a lot better. Like they were like the best 2-14 team ever, which is a stupid thing to say. But they really were, man. They were ahead in the second half of like 8 of their losses or something crazy. A lot of one-score games, and that was with no one at quarterback for a lot of the year. I like their team, and then like I'm always wrong about the Steelers.
Always.
I always overrate them, and so I'm not gonna this year. But man, that's the best defense Mike Tomlin had in a decade.
Yeah.
And it's young and it's awesome. That might be the best front seven in terms of their top 5 players in the entire NFL. And they had a good second.
Cam Newton.
Right. Right. And I love Deontay Johnson, who's going to be the second receiver behind Juju, or they got enough guys for Roethlisberger to throw to. If Roethlisberger is all right, like that division is wild. That division and the NFC South, those are the 2 best divisions.
That was going to be my question to you: is everyone's so like, oh, well, Ben's going to be like, this guy is coming off like a shoulder, like he's not like super into like taking care of his body. Like people just make it like a foregone conclusion, like Ben's going to come back and problems offensively are going to be solved, but I'm not so sure about that.
No, I'm not either. I mean, they got like this guy Chase Claypool, who's a freak in the draft.
Yeah, Notre Dame.
They got Eric Ebron now too, and with Vance McDonald. Like, I don't know. That's every one of those division games is going to be tough. But yeah, Ben's a wild card because he could be a top 5 or 6 guy. That's the thing with Rodgers. Like, I don't even rule out with Ben or Rodgers. If Tom Brady can throw in maybe the best two-year stretch of his career at 39 and 40. I know he's a freak and he's Tom Brady, but it just makes me think, who knows, maybe Rodgers or a guy like Ben can throw in a crazy good year.
Yeah. Is Colin Kaepernick going to get signed before Cam Newton?
No.
I'm starting to think that, man. I don't know, bro.
Unequivocally.
I hope. I mean, even though that'd be weird and that wouldn't make any sense either. I hope so, because Cam's getting back, and I mean, Cam's going to be in the league this year. I'm not really worried about that.
We sure? Are we sure? Like, I don't know, man. Like, this is weird.
It is weird. I don't really have an answer for it. I mean, I don't think there's any chance the Patriots are signing him, but I would love it if they did. Let's fly. Like, let's see what happens with Josh McDaniels and Cam. Part of me thinks, maybe if he's still sitting out there the first week of August. I mean, Belichick loves a bargain.
I could maybe have earlier about like, okay, he has the Lens Frank, he had the shoulder injury, so maybe Kings can't bring him in to whatever. But like at this point, like I don't know what it is. Like it's baffling.
Maybe it's him and his team kind of, he never got any great offers to start, and he's just kind of laying low. It's the pandemic. He's waiting for camp to start. Might see he's just in no hurry, waiting, to get 100% and see if a spot opens up. But he was playing really well under Scott Turner, and Scott Turner's running the Redskins. So that's definitely one team I kind of keeping an eye on, because I don't know how married they are to Haskins.
Speaking of players sitting out there, there's still Clowney, there's still Everson Griffin, which I completely forgot about, except like earlier today I was like, oh shit, like he's still a free agent. And then you read, I think Mike Silver reported that like the Ravens and Seahawks are having like internal discussions of signing Antonio Brown. Just like there's still some quote unquote like big names out there in free agency in this completely dead period that's going on right now.
Right. Clowney and Cam were 2 of the biggest, maybe the 2 biggest names in free agency period.
Yeah.
And they're still out there. It's nuts. I mean, Clowney's a top, 15 defensive end or whatever. Like he has to be on a team. There's a couple guys like Antonio Brown and Josh Gordon and Randy Gregory is another one, where you're kind of thinking, okay, well, they're in different scenarios, but Antonio Brown is like, they got to find out his suspension. That's why he's not on a team.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to get suspended. Josh Gordon and Gregory are ending their suspensions, but they need to get cleared.
Reinstated.
Right. And then someone would give Gordon a job. Gregory is on the Cowboys, but they're hoping that he gets reinstated.
So I just wanted to bring this up, and I was going to do it when Patrick was on the pod, but maybe it's just me, but
you
like,
didn't even tell me that you guys were going to go full.
we're gonna, yeah, man, we're gonna, yeah, we'll set it up. But like all this past, like, I don't want to say fake love that the NFL did over this past Juneteenth of like, oh, well, now we're gonna like observe Juneteenth as like a day off, and like as like a black man, I'm like, Juneteenth was here last year. It was really like, why is it just this now like all like, oh, now we're gonna observe this day off, like climate of what's going on in the world. Just I understood the sentiment, but I just felt like it kind of came off as pandering a bit.
Yeah, I totally get that. I understand. I mean, it's gonna be, how could you not think that? I guess it was in it, and it's a lot of corporations everywhere. It's not.
Yeah, it's not just yeah, for sure. It's
not just the NFL, but it is interesting because I've learned more about Juneteenth certainly this year than I knew before. It's like anything I knew before was from the episode on Atlanta. That I don't know if you remember that episode. That was about it. But it's interesting that actually Juneteenth sort of become more nationally prominent over in the history of our country whenever there's protests, whenever there's civil rights movements. So the same thing happened in the 60s and the 90s too, that Juneteenth kind of became more of a thing around the Rodney King. And so, that's sort of disappointing because then it starts fading away. I will say though, not to like go on too much, but I was on those calls. I was on that call where, Roger Goodell and was, spoke with the whole media, not just the media group, the entire company, and Steve Weish and MJ Acosta, who are great, were hosting it, and there were these panelists who were great in talking about what companies can do, and talking about the Black experience and racism. And I mean, Goodell was taking some questions from the inside. That's like people who had been at the NFL for 30 or 40 years. I mean, no one's ever seen anything like that. That is for sure. I mean, it's different. I mean, everything around this time is different, but you're right, Adam. Like, I don't know, like, is this just going to fade back and feel like it was a PR thing? Like, we'll see. I'm not going to count on it.
Yeah, it's kind of like with the Breeze thing. A lot of people, when he apologized like twice and all that stuff, you had your segment of people that were like, whatever, he had to say that, he was feeling the pressure. And you had some people that were like, oh, he's just, he's trying to come to terms with what's going on. We don't know. We don't know what's going on in Drew Brees' head or whatever. We can only see his actions moving forward. And it's going to be the same thing with the NFL and a lot of these corporations. I can guarantee probably the majority of them, what I call woke capitalism, is just they're making a long-term forecast on, we're hedging our bets. Who are we going to ride with? Who drives the culture? Who is going to push this thing forward? All my life, it's kind of been a progressive push on the culture of America, So we're seeing that, and the corporations have always rolled with that, because if you go look at a marketing team of your random top Fortune 500 company, it's not 50 or 60-year-olds. It's guys younger than me. It's 20, 25-year-olds, guys coming straight out of college, who experience very different things from older people. So, you're going to see that reflected in their marketing campaigns. So it might seem like they're kind of, just trying to ride the wave, and they are, but, that could have a positive effect because, they are a part of the culture. And if whether you want it or not, they are part of the culture that pushes things forward. So, when you see Black Lives Matter and people pushing for equality and all these popular brands, it becomes normalized within the culture. And maybe there are some changes. Maybe not. I don't know. We just this is a whole experiment. We don't know where this thing leads. But yeah, I just been kind of sitting back and I just kind of find it all interesting. And the NFL is kind of has a funny position because they have to kind of navigate because you have your kind of your old school guys that just love football. They don't want to deal with politics when they watch football. But let's be honest, politics and race and culture and all that stuff that's always interfaced with football. And we talking about a league that didn't even allow
Complicated.
it didn't even allow black players at one point, and then that so this has always existed. So this is something they just have to embrace. And I'm glad to see they're at least trying. Even if it's a calculated position they're taking right now, we'll see where it leads. Down down the line.
What do you think, Ed, watching this from the NFL perspective?
Part of me, like a small part of me understands it, but like I think like the PR train from the NFL and just teams have been like full blown. So first it was like the observation of Juneteenth. And then you have Pete Carroll was like, oh, well, I have all these regrets about not signing Kaepernick. And then it was like the Ravens of like everyone has like these, I don't know, regrets or whatever all of a sudden. Like Kaepernick's been out of the league for a while. And like all of a sudden now there are these regrets. And, I know, and I even remember as the Kaepernick thing was happening and as he was in the process of getting blackballed, I remember listening to an episode, of your guys' podcast, and for like a small period of time, like Chris Wessling, like just didn't believe like he was being blackballed. And like, that's something that me and Ryan had kind of discussed like offline. It's like no, like he absolutely like it is. And I think maybe that's just because we're black men and we understand, I don't want to say like game, but like we understand what it is. I don't know. I maybe it's something that will allow them to open their eyes and really truly address, because majority of the league is African American. Like that's who runs the league in terms of players. Now we can talk about GMs and coaches, and that's a whole completely different conversation. But
well, right, and I do think like when the line in Goodell's statement that he made after the players, sent that video where he said that we wouldn't have a league without black men or black players. I do think Goodell is he's in a fascinating spot, but so Goodell is the NFL, but Goodell is also not the owners, and so I do think Goodell doing a video like that and some of what he's done internally, it's like, okay, he's in one spot, but look, he even said he encouraged someone to sign him, and I believe him on that because I think he understands what I said on our podcast 3 years ago. I really did 3 or 4 years ago, was no matter what you think, what the owners think, it's not just like, okay, you could be on the right side of history, because already it was clear they were going to be on the wrong side of history then, but just that it'd be good for the NFL.
Yeah.
If just bottom line, if you wanted to be just talking about money or talking about your fans, like it just would be good. It'd be good for the NFL. So if you take away everything else, like back then, that would have been good for the NFL because people still wouldn't have this image. Like this is a story when this happens. Like my brother, who doesn't know anything about football, he was like, hey, it was good to see the NFL doing this. And a bunch of people that like don't really know, like this is how they know the NFL in some ways.
Right.
It's like that racist league that blackballed Kaepernick. And so now they all think that they're going to get Kaepernick back. And I'm like, well, I don't know. That's up to an owner. And I wish you would think so. One of them would just like be like,
Yeah, just do it, man. Like,
do
just
it and
do it.
like give him too much money, like just so
Yeah.
that it's not even an issue. Just be like, I'll give you 5 million. It's like, or whatever to just give it to him. I mean, the money people have on their salaries for terrible players in this league every year on every single team. People are always like, well, it's a salary cap. You can't just like throw away money. It's like the Patriots are the best run team in the league. They got 23 million on their cap right now for people that aren't on the team. Brady and Antonio Brown and Michael Bennett. They got like 3 million on for Michael Bennett. You
I swear the
can't
Saints are
find
still
Kaepernick a
the
couple.
Saints are still paying Jerry's Bird. I'm telling you, like somewhere on the accounting, he's still like 500,000.
So,
Like, come on.
so it really is fascinating because someone put this. Jim Trotter tweeted out that man, what a high percentage of Trump's biggest donors were NFL owners. I think it was like 9 of his top 16 or something like that.
Which is not shocking at all.
At all.
Okay. No, Stephen Ross has been, and so and some have been more quiet than others, and you think about that, and then you think about what this season is going to be like, because it's not going away, and it's that part of it's fascinating. But I do think, to what you were saying, Ryan, about like whether there is some positives here, I do, and it's slow, like things progress slow, but I don't know. Even people like me, like we're 4 white dudes doing a podcast talking about mostly black men, and like I've always been aware of that, but maybe everyone should be a little more. Maybe like just people are like a little bit more aware of that, and hopefully people are more aware of that, and more to the point, like on the Goodell stuff, on the Goodell internal sort of call thing. Like one of the things that the panelists said immediately was like, the number one thing you can do is take care of your business, take care of your house, look at what's going on in your company and the people that are making decisions in your company. And hopefully like everyone that's been through this, whether they're at a lower level or at a high level, are thinking about that a lot more than maybe they were. Hopefully, who knows?
And I mean, we're on a different subject regarding football, but I think it's fascinating that you brought up, like, kind of, I won't say, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but just kind of being ignorant of like what Juneteenth is. You were born and raised, in Massachusetts. You spent some time in, Louisiana for college, in New York, and then you've been out here. I think I hit all the places. I may have missed a couple. I was born and raised in Texas. So Juneteenth, and I've even had this conversation out, with Ryan offline. Juneteenth in Texas was a huge thing. Like it's a huge celebration. And I always remember that ever since I've been here, and I've been in California like 16, I want to say like 16 years this month actually. Like it is not celebrated the same way whatsoever. Like it's just different geographically of how it's viewed. And you're not the first person I've spoken to that was like, I talked to someone, this week that was like, I didn't even know Juneteenth was even a thing until this year, which like as a person, like blew my mind. Like
I'm not surprised. I mean, that's another thing you would hope is going to change is like, how they're teaching history. Like, someone sent a tweet that was great. This author I follow is a Vietnamese guy, but he was saying how, like, if you look at the bestseller list right now, that bestseller list is basically like the country is taking a course in Black studies and history that the major colleges would never even offer, because they would think it, or require that they would think it would be too radical. And he says, including my college, USC. So he was like putting his name on it, and it's kind of, it's true. Even like the supposed liberal institutions like that, it's like, they're not requiring that. They're not necessarily teaching it.
I want to touch on this and we'll get you out of here because we've been talking forever. We could talk forever, but you brought it up in terms of, salary cap. And I always say that salary cap is a social construct. Uh,
It's good. I never heard that. That's good.
but with this upcoming season, like there's going to be some ramifications for next year's salary cap, whatever. And like, how could that play out in terms of affecting teams and with upcoming, like the salary cap not going up as much as projected and what have you?
It could definitely scare some teams into spending a little less. I think it's going to be overrated, though, in terms of like fans. Like, well, they can't sign Jamal Adams because the salary cap might get down.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know, maybe. I mean, what's the worst case scenario? I guess that it goes down like 10 million or something, 20 million. I mean, that would be significant. But even then, that's 5 to 10%. Which again, if you look at these teams' rosters, like you can find a lot of fat to be cut out. I mean, your boy Mickey Loomis doing the jiu-jitsu financially, he's always figuring it out.
I don't. If this happens, I don't know what. I can't wait to see what Loomis is going to do, man. Because
This is good for the Saints, actually. I swear.
you think so? I don't know.
Because they got Loomis. No one else. He always finds like those millions, in the corner, in the couch cushions or whatever.
It's going to be a 1 million base pay, 4-year contract, 2 years opt out, like ghost years. It's going to be.
When I was at PFT, I was writing articles like, well, these Saints, they can't keep kicking the can down the corner. It's really going to come back to get them sometime. It's like, that was like 2010.
A decade later.
For real. So I mean it, though. I think the smart teams like the Rams and the Eagles, I would throw them in there too. And they're a little more like known for being analytical than the Saints are. But I think the Saints are in their own way financially. It's like, I don't think they worry about the cap like that at all. They spend it to the max, and they know they can just like figure it out when they get there.
Once I figured it out, it's all about cash, man. And like if the NFL owner is about upping the cash, it doesn't matter. It's all it is. The rest is accounting tricks.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it is. But if your owner can up the cash and doesn't care, who cares?
I am curious though what it'll these TV deals are coming up and
Oh man.
right. I think people have I've been kind of I don't know what you would call a bear. Like I've been like I still think like people aren't wrapping their head around all the impact of this pandemic. Economically, that's why
so many consequences that we just can't see.
Right, but like the one that I feel like you should be able to see is like that the economic pain is going to be so long lasting that it's not just like, hey, everything's going to be better next year. No, like
a person that potentially could buy a cheap ticket to go, like maybe because they lost their job or got laid off, like they're, even if things improved in terms of being able to go to games, that's assuming that people are going to even be able to afford to go to games or even afford to have like maybe ESPN or NFL Network to even watch games. It's so far reaching.
Right. And then, I mean, it just affects everyone. It affects the advertising. Like,
yeah,
it affects big businesses. I think it's just been, we've kind of still been in this bubble because like, rich people don't care because the stock market's been going up and I read something how like, poverty's actually improved, like the level of poverty's improved because everyone got those stimulus checks. For real. It's not a joke. I mean, it's like, so for money. Now, I don't think the pain is totally hit because the government's, put so much money in. I mean, I'm not some economic
expert. Drying up.
Just, man, I just feel like I just worry about the fall and the winter and beyond.
Yeah. One of my favorite things, just to beat on you a little bit, I don't know, it was an episode a long time ago, and you walked right into a stereotype. You being a young Jewish man, and I think it was the Raiders were on Hard Knocks, and one of the players was trying to teach the other players about compound interest.
Yeah,
And
Carl
you, and-
Nassib, right? Was it?
yeah,
Was it
Nessa, and you were like,
the Browns?
we learned. I mean, you learned about that in seventh grade. I mean, not like he was teaching anything. I'm like, Greg just walked into a stereotype of a young Jewish man, but nobody got on you about it. I just thought that was hilarious, man. And I don't even know if you realized.
I probably did, yeah. No, my wife always comments on that. She's just like, I don't even want to get into it, but but just like yeah, because I'll just talk to my kids about money like real, like anything else. It's just money. People get so weird about money, so I explain like how money works. It's that this we don't just get to live in this house just for fun. Like Daddy's got to write these articles, so like that gives us the money, and
There you
then
go.
you
Speak on it.
tell them how it all works. She was like we weren't having these conversations in my house, when I was a kid.
We're gonna get you out of here, man. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Any? I mean, I know you have your quarterback articles coming out. Anything else that you have coming, on the way, article
No,
wise?
we got the Friday NFL show this week. We got a couple more this summer. We'll see. Hopefully they bring us and have us do it during the year, but we're on at 6 p.m. Friday and a bunch of replays on NFL Network.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have NFL Network, watch the show, support them.
And we'll be podcasting straight through. Usually, like I was going to go to Japan for 3 weeks.
Nope.
I was going to go to the Olympics. That's where my in-laws live. I had tickets to the Olympics, but now I'm not taking any time really. So we're doing podcasts straight through, no time off.
Is training camp supposed to start in July? Like, is that supposed to happen?
Yes, same dates as normal. So July 28th is everyone's supposed to report then. I think they might adjust it. I wouldn't be surprised if they got rid of the Hall of Fame game and so that those two teams aren't coming in a week early. But technically, they're supposed to come in a week before that.
All right. Well,
I mean, they got to get rid of a fifth preseason game. Give me a break.
Come on.
Out of here. My last one for you, Greg. I know you went to Tulane and you spent a little time in New Orleans. We have a lot of New Orleans listeners. I just wanted to, what was your experience in New Orleans? This was back in the early 2000s, pre-Katrina. What was your experience back then, in New Orleans?
I mean, that's too long of a answer. I could hit that in a million different ways. Yeah, I was a freshman in 97. I graduated in 01. I love New Orleans. I always thought I was going to move back. I was definitely in that Tulane bubble that like everyone in Uptown like hates Tulane students, and like I get why they hate Tulane students. By the end of it, I realized you're sort of in that bubble. But man, I loved everything about it. I loved the feel of it. It was I feel like it was a little dangerous. Yeah. A little dangerous then. That was
yeah, a little bit.
I'm just saying, I don't want to get crazy, but but especially that time, I feel like it was also, I mean, there's been plenty of other times, but that late 90s, it was something. You had to know what was up. But man, I love New Orleans, like the food, the attitude, the people. I just started talking slower. It just chilled me out to live in New Orleans.
Yeah, so that was during the Sean King heyday, right?
I did student television for our football team.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It was not the undefeated year. Like the student TV stopped doing it that year, which is unbelievable. But the year before, when they were pretty good, but it was Sean King. But yeah, I was like the color announcer on the student television where they would just like replay the game during the week and stuff. Meweldy Moore, man, those teams were good, man. I mean, you want to talk about systemic racism. I mean, how about hiring Chris Selfo over Rich Rodriguez? Man.
Oh.
And he called him out for it too. He said Tulane was just a bunch of racists. He said it at the time. Damn. It was a big story to me. No one else cared, but that was a crazy, crazy story.
Well, Greg, if hopefully it's been an hour and a half, so if the kids aren't up now, hopefully they won't be up. So
Yeah, you're the host. You got to stop me from talking or keep this going.
Absolutely not. That's not how I do things. Follow Greg on Twitter at Gregg Rosenthal. Read Perfected Starter Series. The upcoming article dropping about quarterbacks. Read that. I do read your work. Thank you very much. Calling me out like I don't read your work often. That's complete.
I don't blame you. I don't feel like no one's reading articles on the internet anymore. It's a dying breed.
You gotta tweet it, man. Like nobody surfs the internet anymore. Like you gotta tweet it out.
Right, that's true. Sometimes I don't tweet it out, so I should do it. I want to come back, in the off season. I just want to talk New Orleans the whole time with Ryan. I got a lot to talk about. I got a lot to say about late '90s, early 2000s New Orleans, like the time Juvenile knocked on my buddy's door looking for his girl.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you coming back, boy.
He was just at the wrong place. There's not much of a story, but it still was. Yeah, it was still juvie.
Say water with my old lady.
Yeah, pretty much. They're like, nah, man, you got the wrong apartment. But for real, like that time, because we were there during, right when 400 Degrees came out my sophomore year or my freshman. So like Hot Boys came out my freshman year. And so it was like we were right there for like the very peak of it. And it was like being in Liverpool when the Beatles, came out. Man. I'm not even kidding. Like the city was just going crazy. It was just crazy.
Had you experienced a New Orleans club during that time period when Back That Ass Out came out?
Like, what are you talking about?
So I'm just saying, like, because I think about like what that would have been like even to this day, and I can't fathom just how amazing that feeling is.
I mean, forget that. I can remember a solid 6 months where the knockoff Back That Ass Up.
Yeah.
I think it was Shake It. It was like Shake It Like a Dog by Cain and Abel. The place went crazy for that for 6 months. I'm telling you, that song was the biggest song ever, and that was like a year and a half after it came out. It never stopped. But I'm not even kidding. Changed my life. Like that song, to me, that's still one of the great songs in American history, man. That to me was the song that changed everything.
Don't get me started, bro. I'll be up all night, man. I'll have you up all night talking that shit. Listen.
We're gonna say that for the New Orleans rap.
Greg likes rap.
Yeah.
Hey, right quick. I just want to put a shout out to my wife's birthday coming up in the next 30 minutes. My beautiful wife, Brianna, she's going to be turning, I'm not going to say the age, but just want to wish her a happy birthday. I love her to death, and we're going to have a good time. And, we've been together 15 years.
Woo!
Yeah. Woo. Married for, I don't know, a year and a half, whatever. But, I just want to wish her a happy birthday. And, I just want to do that. And shout out to Greg's wife. Hope she has a happy birthday too, since they're on the same day.
Look at that, Emeka. Yeah, how about you? Really made your wife wait there.
Yep.
Like we need this listen. Like you gonna listen to the entire episode.
Yeah, Emeka's never listened to even
your podcast.
My podcast, not once. She once listened to it for 2 minutes in the car, and she was just like, "Why are we listening to this?" So
I love it. Same here.
I've met Emeka, so that is not surprising in the least bit. So
it's all business.
To both of you guys, to Bree, to Emeka, happy birthday, ladies. You women supported these knuckleheads, and we appreciate y'all. So happy birthday to you, ladies.
Absolutely.
All right. So with that, and all the sap and all the love, we're gonna get out of here. Another episode of #Saints Twitter Pod in the book. As always, Greg, we mess around, we joke around our life, but you're like family, and we're buddies. So as always, appreciate you coming on and talking to us.
No, I appreciate it. There's no other There's no other two guys that would do 90 minutes on a Tuesday night in June. So that's the best compliment I can give you. And I had a blast the whole time. I'd do it again tomorrow. No, though that's her birthday. I would not do that.
Yeah.
I would not do it tomorrow.
All right, so we're gonna get out of here. Let you get some rest, and we'll be back with another episode of #podcast. We're out.
Peace.
It's time for another season of the Palmetto Porch, an original podcast from Discover South Carolina. I'm Devin Whitmire. Join me as I get to the heart of what makes South Carolina such a great place to visit by speaking to the locals who make it so special. Premiering December 5th, find the Palmetto Porch wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information about our show, visit scpalmettoporch.com.